Hey, welcome back to Appalachian Expose. Of course, I'm the franchise. Shane Douglas is sitting next to me. One of the big stars of the business today, Matt Riddle. Matt, appreciate you being here, brother.
Dude, thanks for having me, Shane.
Oh, man, that's great.
Yeah.
You know, when you come in, and you'll find this out at some point down the road when you become that older veteran guy, it's, you know, the business has changed a lot. So there's a lot of people that think from my generation, and there's sporadic times, me, like, this doesn't interest me because it's not what we did. It's like a baseball player playing football. It just passes in the night. But occasionally those guys, those talents that come through that you may not see, but you hear the name, and then you hear the name, and you hear the name, and then you finally see them. For me, like with your background, this is what really, and I'm jumping around to try to put it together in a cogent thought. My intention in the ECW was to take it away from the cartoon and much closer to shoot fighting.
Yeah.
Just put that element of reality back into it. And we were doing a pretty good job of that. Left to 95 for 6 months. And I came back and just naive. We left the wrestling company, and 6 months later I come back and there's two guys dressed in overalls, tie-dyed, bright fluorescent shirts, both wearing glasses, one black, one white, saying they're brothers. Perry Saturday, I go and love you, Perry, but just the peculiar look. And Ray Mysterio and all those guys came in. For our business, they're small, right?
Yeah.
I'm going, what the hell happened while I was gone? And then the bell sounded, and I saw Ray go out with Juventud. I saw the Dudleys have an incredible match with the John Crotus and Perry Saturn. The Eliminators.
The Eliminators,
yeah. And I thought, man, I stand corrected. These guys can all go. How long have you been in the business?
Well, I've been a fan of the business for a long time, but wrestling since I think 2015.
Okay, it's come up with 10 years.
Almost 10 years.
Post.
And I'll be there almost. I started training at the Monster Factory. When I first started, I stopped fighting. And it wasn't that I wanted to stop fighting. It was just like, if you're not like in the UFC, supporting a family off like fighting mixed martial arts is really almost impossible, Right, And I started pro wrestling. And the reason I started pro wrestling is I saw so many guys like Daniel Bryan and even Dolph Ziggler and others that weren't as big. And of course, there's Rey Mysterio, but he was one small guy in a world of giants, right? Well, now you got more and more guys, and they got the cruiserweights, and there was a lot going on, and there seemed like there was more opportunity. And with the network, $9.99 at the time, it made affordable for even me on my MMA salary, where I could watch pay-per-views again, and the legends of wrestling and everything. And I kind of found myself falling back in love with it. And that's when I actually sold my house in Vegas and moved to the Northeast, because there's way more wrestling in the Northeast than the Southeast, and there's on the West Coast, because I was in Vegas, and I started training at the Monster Factory.
Nice. Now I'm curious, because my earliest recollection of UFC shoot fighting, shouldn't say UFC, of shoot fighting, and then companies like UFC and Bellator later, whatever, and I had no understanding of where it came from. We had boxing, we had football, all these different sports, and then boom, here's this new thing called UFC MMA fighting, and I thought, man, they saw a gimmick right there. They already did it. Dennis Corluzzo, of course, was involved with the NWA in New Jersey at the time, and there was some kind of connection to his connection to Atlantic City. And if you remember, Atlantic City was the first one that said, because prior to that, it was like same as ECW, we were being likened with a human cockfight, right? Just tear each other's eyeballs out. And you guys had the same thing, and then they came along and made the subtle adjustments. Just got,
Well, I will say this: the original UFC rules, mixed martial arts rules, were anything goes. I think you couldn't bite or eye gouge. I think those were the two. Well, I remember one guy got punched in the groin until he just tapped.
Wow, yes.
And whoa, when I got to it, there was a lot more rules, but at the same time, it was still banned. You couldn't have an MMA gym in New York or in a lot of the states. And I trained in New York, but I did jiu-jitsu and boxing, and then we'd have to go spar people underground or randomly places.
And what year would this have been?
This is 2005, 2006.
Wow.
That's probably when I started fighting.
Yeah.
But I was already, because I wrestled in college, wrestled in high school, won states and
Imagine that a pro wrestler having some real wrestling experience, right?
And honestly, I would suggest to anybody that's watching that wants to get into pro wrestling, it's good, even if you don't use those moves in your character, your wrestling.
Sure.
To have that background, to know if you get stuck in a sticky situation, you've been there before, you can get out of it. And like, that's why I feel like when I started pro wrestling, one, I was very acclimated to the moves because I did some pro wrestling when I was a kid, and then messing around as an adult. But by the time I got there, I was very comfortable in a ring, and people grabbing me and me grabbing them back. You know?
Yeah. I'm curious, what I always tell people about getting into wrestling when I did, it was pure happenstance because I had no idea how do you get into wrestling? Where do you apply? There weren't internet and all these things today, right? Schools.
Same thing when I started fighting. It was all very underground. You would just see like a poster somewhere.
So you had your amateur background in wrestling, but how old were you when you started the MMA fighting? And
I would say MMA fighting, I would say just like the very, very start. It was probably in high school, but there was no MMA gyms for us to train. There was like a boxing gym, and then wrestling, amateur wrestling, and jiu-jitsu. But if you're wrestling in high school, a lot of times they don't tell you to do jiu-jitsu because they teach you to go to your back and do things like that. So I stuck with the wrestling in high school, but I bought some bag gloves, a couple pairs, and me and other guys on the wrestling team would go up to the room when the coach wasn't there and basically sport out. And I did that through high school and college. So technically I was sparring people since like 15, 16.
Did that young Matt Riddle at that point, I apologize, did you have big enough balls to think, I'm going to keep going in this?
Well, I was always one of those guys, like, I knew I wouldn't be happy in a desk job or something like that. And I also didn't want to dig ditches my whole life either. So I was like, I need to figure something out. And I really excelled at amateur wrestling. And when I saw that, I was like, hey, I got a feeling like this is probably like my outlet into this realm, this world, this pro wrestling world where I didn't, like you said, where do you train? Like, especially when you're a kid. And then like the people that did do pro wrestling, they also did MMA in a random wrestling.
Oh, really? So the wrestling schools would have some MMA?
So there's an amateur wrestling school, but in the back room, there's a pro wrestling ring, and they also did pro wrestling and MMA, right? There's the human cockfighters. This is around the same time, like 96, like when I was like, just starting off in like middle school wrestling and going to camps and what have you, but they're like, stay out of that room. I didn't like but you also got to see like the evolution of not just pro wrestling, because think about where pro wrestling is today, and it's a completely different market. The markets, there's things you can't say now that you could say then, and then there's things you can say now that you definitely couldn't say then. Like, culture change, just like you said. 6 months later, there's dudes in tie-dye bib overalls, the Dudleys, and you're just like, what happened, But I think with wrestling, because it's not just a sport, it's entertainment, and entertainment and culture changes quick, and especially now. Like then, 6 months. It took about 6 months, right? Now that can happen literally overnight. One viral video.
It's curious for me because typically it's like behind the music episodes, right? It's different faces, different songs, but the story's pretty much the same. These guys get together, they make great music, become super rich, hate each other, won't ever talk to each other again. And in wrestling, the same thing. Once we had cleared that hurdle of the human cockfight syndrome, it was the same year as UFC 1993. Paul Heyman was very hesitant to changing his product. And I get it. My brother was a set designer, an artist, and if you go to the artist and say, "That's a nice painting, but I would have made that side a little more taupe," and that's stepping on toes, bro. That's shut the fuck up. That's my artwork.
I agree.
And so again, it's the typical answer when you talk to all these interviews that I've done. I started watching pro wrestling at a young age, loved it. A bunch of us sort of fell away from it and then came back. 12, 13, 14. But you were actually doing, even though you had amateur wrestling background, you were actually doing the MMA.
Yeah.
Before pro wrestling.
I also looked at it like this. I was a huge pro wrestling fan. But as I got older and growing up, I'm 6'2". I was built very good.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when you look at most pro wrestlers, especially in that era,
Right.
dude, I'm one of the guys that shows up and gets tossed around and beat up.
Yeah.
And I did, and of course, there's cruiserweights and Rey Mysterio and WCW before they came. But I didn't see that. I was like, I don't see that. And then when the world of the mixed martial arts and the UFC, honestly, after the first Ultimate Fighter,
Right.
The sport really blew up.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was wrestling in college at the time, and I was like, you know what? I love pro wrestling. I'm wrestling in college. The goal is still to do something with this.
Sure. Yeah.
Even though I'm there to get a degree in the health and phys ed.
Right.
But when I was there, I was just like, you know what? I think I can fight. And there's weight classes. There's more.
Yeah.
There's more of an opportunity
Right.
because I can. If it's not 185, it's 170.
Yeah.
And then I can fit that niche right there. And then with my wrestling background, and I picked up jiu-jitsu really quick within the first year. I compete as much as possible. Usually when I pick something up, I want to do it all the time. So I compete. I probably had 100 or so matches in the first year, and I was ranked top 20 in the world in that first year. Then I tried out for the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating art to me because, like I said, it's behind the music. Little change here, little change there, but it's pretty much the same story that's always been told. And for me, I'm excited about this interview because 99, if not 100% of the people I've interviewed, I've worked with on the road, been on the road with, known them for 30 years, and yet I still find out things about that I had never heard before. I've known these guys for 35, 40 years, and I never knew Robert Gibson's brother was deaf and he could sign language. Never saw him doing sign language, pivot table, whatever. To the shoot fighting and the college wrestling and amateur wrestling background, where was the linchpin that took you to the WWE?
No, when I first started training, just because I had the MMA background and just a controversial career even in mixed martial arts, the second I started training pro wrestling, TMZ and everybody started doing articles, and then I trained at the Monster Factory, and I think MVP came through there. It's Sean Waltman, Bigelow. A lot of guys came, but when I was there, a lot of guys came in to help coach and teach. But a lot of these guys are connected one way or another. They put their 2 cents in. Eventually, I got a tryout pretty shortly after, and they were very, very high on me. But then because of my past with the UFC, failed a drug test for cannabis, and at this time, cannabis was a complete no-no. And then I started wrestling on the indies, because I wasn't going to just take that now. Okay. And I started working with Evolve and Progress, Rev Pro, OTT in Ireland, Defy in the Pacific Northwest, and House of Glory. I was wrestling everywhere. And that's what I knew I needed to do. And then even New Japan was going to pick me up. But then because of my past with the UFC, they were like, oh, Japan, very taboo with cannabis. So I was like, okay. And I felt like everybody, these were all no's, and they wanted to see my reaction almost, And I was just like, cool. I was just like, I'll just keep wrestling, become undeniable until you call me. And eventually, that's what happened. New Japan called me. Then I talked to Gabe, and I was like, hey, New Japan's talking to me. You might want to say something to people and the Triple H called me.
Nice.
The rest is history, but that was the linchpin. My connection with Evolve and Gabe, and then just working everywhere nonstop, and And I'll also say a lot of time in pro wrestling, and this is just a lot of politics, right? Right, even especially not just in WWE, but especially on the independents. There's so many different companies. If for someone like you or myself, the more companies I work for, the more valuable I am, the more eyes that are on me, the more money I can make, right? But for these other companies, it kind of it's almost like it's territory days, but it's not territory days because everything's on the internet. And the drama between them can be a little much. But like me, I'm just trying to mend all fences and work everywhere, right? No.
With relation to this, as you were answering, I was running my promos through my head at the beginning of ECW, 93, 94, when this whole thing, human cockfight and all that was coming around. And the promo, it was like sort of my go-to line, was the marquee outside says, wrestling, I look up Webster, wrestling is a sport, it's a shoot, it's a goddamn shoot. And when I would say that, Paul loved it until this controversy came up. And he came to me, it's the only time he ever did that to me, he came to me and said, stop saying it's a shoot. And I said, it's a wrestling term, right? It's not, I say, hey, we're real wrestling, but just that it was a shoot. And, but it was necessary because we weren't going to be able to get outside of Philadelphia or those few East Coast cities if we hadn't done that. It always has interested me that the parallels between UFC and ECW, because we didn't have a billion-dollar corporation behind us or some network behind us. We had Todd Gordon, he's independently wealthy, but not wealthy to start a wrestling company.
Yeah.
That's a different level of money, you know. Well, of course, Dolph Ziggler has an amateur background. Who else in your generation or was in WWE at that time also had amateur wrestling background or shoot fighting background? Were you pretty much a rarity in that?
I was a rarity in I would say this is what makes me rare to most of those other people. And I didn't compare myself to a Severn or Shamrock or a Brock. Brock's very good at it, though. I wouldn't even put Brock. But I'd say even like a Shayna, they're very good.
Yeah.
But most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they are so dominant because they're a fighter. Well, I feel like my character, even though I was ranked top 10 in the world, and I'm legit. Like I don't. But I also, I think one of my strengths is my ability to sell.
Yeah.
So very much so, like even though I can kill and do all the moves and deadlift everybody up and do everything, the ability to sell and be vulnerable is where I had the value, and I think that's what separates me from all the other mixed martial artists that did it with me. But there's other like Ronda Rousey, Shayna Baszler, and there's others like Shamrock and Severn. But I don't think anybody was able to do it quite like myself. I think there's still a lot of people might watch a lot of their wrestling. Shayna's really good, but like some of the others, and be like, like, kind of one-dimensional, like you know, and I figured my thing is I was such a fan of pro wrestling growing up. I didn't just want to be, like a little Brock Lesnar. I wanted to be me. I wanted to be able to do it all.
Right.
And be able to take Canadian destroyers from a Jeff Hardy or whatever and sell it over the top, and not just no-sell everything. Or I wanted to be able to translate that. And honestly, I think my time on the independents really made me do that because the only way to get their respect is by being good. Yeah. And it's not like you have 10 feet or 20 feet. The crowd's right up on you. You got to be really good.
Yeah, a lot of parameters. Anytime we do a seminar, I always throw this question because I know the answer is going to be, but also to let them hear it, because when I was breaking in, we didn't hear this type of stuff like, hey, this is a really hard industry to pick up. Being a great athlete's hugely helpful. Yeah. If you could put some acting or a character to believability, that's helpful. But if none of those are guarantees, and we see people come into wrestling all the time, my entire career, if he's going to be a star, right? 6 months later, it's gone. Just quit the business and went on. So there is so much to it with that. When you're with your background in shoot fighting, I guess I want to try to make sure I word this properly, because I think it's something that's definitely lacking in our big career, in our business right now. There was a point in my career, 5-6 years maybe in that range. We're working 350 days back then, double shots on the weekends. But if something in those first 5 years, a spot got missed, somebody slipped, whatever, my hair would literally catch on fire. Yeah. Now what do we do? And about that 5-6 year mark, as we started thinking, not that you were anywhere near mastering it. If something went south in the match, my hair wouldn't catch on fire, and so you start to calm down into that niche. How helpful or of a hindrance do you think it was coming into pro wrestling, right? Especially coming like WWE that goes that cartoon route and really pushes out for the entertainment value. How much was your shoot fight background helpful, and were there any hindrances to it?
So when I first started on the indies, And once I started to really embrace the MMA background, it was perfect, you know, especially for the time. In the sense of a lot of people, you go into a wrestling, and another thing too, when I first started pro wrestling, I'm still new, right?
Yeah.
But I'm looked at up here because of my background in the UFC. Now, when I first started, I was doing like frog splashes and spine busters, and a bunch of moves like I seen on TV. And then but other people are doing them, and to be honest, they were doing them better than me because they've been doing it for a decade, and I just started doing it like 6 months ago. But what I did better was German suplexes and shoot moves that I do all the time when people are trying to stop me. So it's like, okay, why don't I do these and do more submissions and strikes and things like that? Another thing I do on the indies is people would go to whip me and I just walk.
Yeah.
Like you go to whip and I just take 2 steps, turn around and hit you. You know, why would I keep running? And then when I got to WWE, kind of had to work a little more with people in the sense I can't just have this gimmick like this guy's move. You got to get whipped into this and etc. So you got to be more lenient, right? Kind of like we were talking about, like if you want to be able, hey, we're never going to leave these areas if we don't change a couple of things. And it's the same thing with, and it stinks to an extent for the artist, but at the same time, when you're looking at branding and things like that at a major scale and money talks, you know, everything else walks. And even if a guy has a great screenplay or a good movie that they wrote, the people that are investing, the people that are going to spend millions of dollars are going to make this a reality. They might want to change or put a different character here or there because they have an agenda or whatever it is. But it's usually for financial benefit.
Of course. For the old timers, we'll say, my generation coming in at the tail end of the territories. So if you struck out here or here and there, there were still 8, 10, 12 promotions in Portland, all the ones you mentioned earlier, that we could still go to and get our foot in the door. Was there any consternation of the guys that were the pro wrestlers, right? The guys that did not have that amateur background or shoot fighting background or real athletic background? They went to a school, excelled, got over, made some money, got out there to do it. That, I would contend, is vastly different from somebody who's been doing shoot fighting for how long. So was there anybody in WWE or any company that you worked with that would go to the promoter and say, hey, this guy's a shooter, I don't want to work with him?
No, I'm pretty laid back and nice.
Really?
I mean,
I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, I feel like people, like, I think if anything, I think that's why I get as much respect as I have over the years and things like that, because people know how legit I am and how dangerous I could be, or if somebody, because I've been potatoed before, you know, I get walled, and I could give them a receipt right there, and it might be too much, right? And I never have, and I never will. It's just not my style. Even after the match, I'm like, hey, you know, you split my face open here, or whatever. But I don't know, but I also think that's part of being professional, right? You know, now if somebody keeps doing it, I'll get them back. And of course, I've accidentally hit some people, and I have, my bad. You know, I don't make it obvious. I'm like, I'm sorry. You know? But yeah, you know, so I think that's part of it. And I think a lot of the guys, even though a lot of people do pro wrestling, you know, the people I work with, most of them are mixed martial arts fans and have an appreciation because they know how hard pro wrestling is, and they also can probably imagine if they've never done it how hard professional fighting is. Of course, you know, especially mixed martial arts where you're in a steel cage and there's like no breaks or like break, like you're just it's brutal. So I think a lot of people respect me and got that. Nobody really was like, oh. You know, I would say a couple of times I've made comments like being sarcastic, because I'm sarcastic, and people think I'm serious, and they're like, I'm sorry, and I'm like, oh, I was kidding. Like the last night, I told, I think it's this one wrestler, White Mike. Then I told him, I was like, we were checking out one of these tables in this hotel, and they're pretty thick, and I was like, dude, I would put you through it. And he's like, why would you threaten to put me through a table? I was like, I wouldn't really. Come on, don't. He thought I was being serious, like I was mad. I was like, no. But I think that's also the fighting background. People don't know, like, I got a screw loose.
And that competitive nature, because ribs can be competitive too.
They sure can.
And, you know, and having fun. And I always thought that was a part of the business. You know, Moose and I always thought, for anybody that's been an athlete, never been in a locker room, the cutting up, ball busting, it's everywhere, right?
It is.
You learn it.
It's well, not only that, it's a camaraderie. It's
Yes.
I would even say this. There's statistics that say if you don't like poke fun to your significant other, it's sadly not as healthy. But like you should be able to, bullshit and have fun with the person you're in love with, or your buddies that you are taking each other's lives in your hands every time you're in that ring. Because I think people also forget that that's pro wrestling. Dude, when you're doing reverse rounders off the top rope and destroyers and all these dives and moves, dude, our lives are in each other's hands. If we slip or we're out of place or whatever, that's we could get paralyzed or lifelong injury,
Like that, right? I asked Kevin Sullivan 6-8 months before he passed away. How many times in your career? First, I asked him, how many matches have you had in your career? And what did he say? Something like 10,000 or something. And I said to him, my God, that's his thesis. And were there ever times that you were injured enough that you could not go to the ring? Simply not safe to go to the ring in the injuries you have. And he said one time in the last match that he had before he retired, then came back out of retirement, kid dropped him on his head and damn near broke his neck. Yeah. And at our age, you get something like that, it's pretty debilitating. So
pretty debilitating at any age.
At any age, absolutely.
For sure. But I know what you're saying.
So it was the fact that we had in my mind's eye right now, I'm looking around in those dressing rooms that we were in as those snot-nosed kids, and literally everybody in that dressing room was a future Hall of Famer. Every one of those men and women knew their way around the ring with blinders on. And they were all salty as hell, right? So there were a lot of things going on there that when I came into business, it was just a lot easier to keep your mouth shut and listen and go along. But the problem, as I see it today, and I'm going to see if you agree with this, is I was, for the first 5 or 6 years, all those numbers are standard for a reason, because it was in those 5 or 6 years that I was working a 6-month-long program with Pez Watley and then Black Bart and this person and that person. They were just doing this, like taking me and giving it to me, and suddenly the light bulb went on. Do you find, like, at times, because of your amateur background, you said, the taters, right? 1 might be an accident, 2 might be an accident, 3 or 4, probably not.
You also got to realize who you're wrestling too. Sometimes. Yeah. Some dudes just different style, and like they do kind of like, say I wrestled Jeff. Yeah. Jeff. He doesn't knock you out, but Jeff hits you. He
little half rounders.
He half rounders, right? And it's Jeff Hardy, right? Yeah, so it makes sense. This is acceptable. Right. But sometimes when you get potato at like a house show or something, and it's like, dude, no need for that potato.
Did you ever have to resort to your shoot fighting background?
Yeah.
Pretending something happened in the ring or dressing room.
I was in Australia once, and I was wrestling a guy, and I pride myself on my grappling background, with state national titles, and then, jiu-jitsu, I had world titles and national titles with that. And I was wrestling in Australia, the guy was a grappler, He's like, hey, do you mind if I put you in a submission at one point during the match? I go, sure, more than happy to get in a submission. How do you want me to get out? He's like, oh, do this or that. I was like, I'll find a way out. And he puts me in the submission, which is fine. And as he has me in the submission, he slaps me on the ass. Not only you tied me up, now you're
toy you. Well, toy with you.
Well, no. Yeah. You can put me in a submission, but you got to be holding on. Right. The second you did that, I hit a switch on, took it back, put him in a rear naked choke, and put it on. And I go, get to the rope. Get to the rope. Sure. And I wasn't going to let go. He got to the rope, and I let go on 3. Yeah. And he rolled out of the ring, caught his breath, and I was like, get back in here. And then we went back to the match, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he apologized for slapping me on the ass when he put a submission on. And I don't think you meant any ill will, but it's also like, this is my legitimacy, right? If you did that to Ronda Rousey, there would be hell to pay one way or another. Just like if you did that to Brock. If Brock said, you can put me in an arm bar or put me in a guillotine, you got him in a guillotine and reach around and slap Brock on the ass, he's going to feel it and be like, you're making fun of me. And he's probably going to suplex you right? Yeah. He's like, I just did the show.
Because ultimately that's what we're doing, right? If there's personal issues, if there's another shooter in the dressing room that thinks you may not be as tough as I've heard or whatever, there's a place to handle that, and it's not while we're at work.
Well, and I'll say this. I will say the greatest thing about, like, say, with pro mixed martial arts and UFC, and now with the world of the internet and being able to train and what have you, it really opens people's eyes to legitimacy, and especially in the locker room, right? I'll tell you this, nobody really stepped up to me other than it be a Brock or somebody like that. But even then, like, Bobby Lashley was always kind of, Bobby's a stud. He's somebody that can do it all, you know?
Yes, sir.
But like, dude, and then the guys that know who are legit, like, say you got Chad Gable. He's not a mixed martial artist, but that guy's a world-class athlete, was on an Olympic team, and is a Olympic-level wrestler. And he's a beast. Like, he would do work to some people in the street, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So, like, we all know who's legit. Like, we all have backgrounds. Then there's other guys that are like, I'm tough. And you're like, dude. Sweet leather jacket, bro. You know?
A lot of different stuff. When you went into wrestling, was it something you planned cognizantly? I'm going to do this as my career to the end of the line, or do this in hopes of opening up other opportunities?
I always look. I always look at worst case scenario. It's probably not the, you know, I've talked to therapists and like, you probably shouldn't look at life like this, but I feel like it always keeps me on my toes, and I always think worst case scenario. When I started wrestling, things are going good, and even when I was crushing on the indies, but I had everybody saying no, like WWE saying no, TNA's not calling me, MLW, I worked with them, but I couldn't sign with them because I was with Evolve, and so it was just I forgot what I was saying, but
do it all the time. So
but you know, I forgot where I was going with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the old saying when we were coming into the business was an old golf euphemism, right?
Yeah. You
play it where it lays. You can't say, well, it's better. It's easier shot from over there, so I'm going to pick my ball up and move over there. And like when I'm watching wrestling, I'm curious how, again, with the shoot fight background, you will see somebody knock somebody down, pick them back up, and then Irish whip them and put them right back on the mat. And I'm asking, well, if you want to go on the mat, why do you just slide it behind and lock whatever hold on? How often, well, it's obviously just about every time, do you sense your shoot fight background coming in when it may not be the right place for that? Maybe this is the place for the ground and pound or aerial or whatever. So do you have to like almost tamp down your instincts?
No, I've tailored it around the pro wrestling. Like, I'm not one of those guys that's gonna probably pick you up to just put you back down on the mat.
Yep.
If you're down, I'm gonna like probably kick you while you're down until you sell somewhere else. Or say if it's a tag, I'll tag somebody in for them to get on you and probably pick you up and whip you and do something. Right? I think wrestling, you know, if you're not hearing cheers, people think you have to do something. Like, you need to make motion. But a lot of times, just looking into the crowd and getting a connection, that's all you need. And then when you go to do something, it means a little bit more.
Sure.
Rather than, you know, and a lot of people fancy themselves really good pro wrestlers, and they got a series of moves that they've mastered, and they do that. But it's like, you don't get people time to like absorb it, appreciate it, you know?
Yes. Moose and I were at a show with Kevin, oddly enough, what was that, 6-7 years ago? When the first match we watched, and we saw it get off track. It was at least 4 or 5, 6 years ago for sure. But what happened was I didn't want to go to the dressing room after we finished up the signing, because then it becomes, hey man, you know, good to see you, brother. The story, you're half the show, you're still in the dressing room.
Yeah.
So me, Kevin, and Moose, Danny the Dinosaur, walked in the front door, and Kevin and I sort of like let Moose stand out front there and block it as we're watching the first match. Again, names are relevant. One of the kids I worked with extensively prior, good hand, good in-ring performer. The other kid I hadn't seen, but I heard his name over and over and over again. And so I was sort of excited to see this match, curtain jerk match, and it's going to be able to set this show on a real good trajectory just from the first match. And I'm watching over his shoulder, and what had happened was, and I say it jokingly, but it was ribbon on a square. It almost became like an old Japanese Godzilla movie. You know, the lip sync doesn't add up, and you're going, okay, something wrong there. The point you just made about just taking 1 second to go and see what the audience is, because there's multiple ways of silence, right? That's one silence, or one of those is good, one of them is bad.
Yeah.
And if you don't look, you're not going to do it or see it. Do you find, like, with your peers, like, I'm guessing, obviously, you learned both in amateur background in wrestling, but once you went into the UFC or MMA, that these were things like, the basic things that are the low-hanging fruit. Never expose your back. Never turn your back on your opponent, right? If you're going to attack, make damn sure you have the opening for that attack. In wrestling, where wrestling had gone, it's my big criticism of the business today, and not of the business, but the companies running the business, is that as we watch the numbers slough, and the numbers are precipitous when you look at the numbers. In 92-3, when ECW, WCW, and WWF were all competing, and through most of the rest of the 90s, there was this real competition between the three companies, but also the semblance to, like Bill Watts would say, just make it look real, just make it make sense. And a vast portion of what you're watching today makes no sense. I'm going to ask you a question. I know the answer to it. I want to hear your answer.
Don't
to
get
it. If you had me in the corner beating the shit out of me, why would you run all the way over to the corner to touch the door and come back and start punching me again? And so every time now I ask a kid, why did you do that? And I go, I thought it was exciting. But you've got a guy in the corner, we're all gladiators, right? And you turned your back on him, and then just to go over, touch your toe over there to come back, it just doesn't make sense to me. So with that, do you think your instincts from MMA and from shoot fighting, your amateur wrestling background, served its purpose that you realized stuff like that didn't make sense?
I'll say this. One thing I've noticed when I started pro wrestling is if somebody didn't call it, especially at the beginning, if somebody didn't call it or they know it's happening, it's not going to happen and people start getting confused.
Sure.
And I think for me, just when I get in the ring, I'm a character outside the ring, but once I'm in the ring, I start moving different. I'm shuffling, like I'm shaking out my arms, like I'm getting ready to I'm getting limber to go at you,
course,
right?
yeah.
And I feel like just that mannerism. And then when I have somebody in the corner, the only way I'm getting off somebody, and I tell reps, I'm like, call it down the middle, and get in between. Because if I'm beating somebody or I'm choking them, I'm not gonna let go unless you're get off.
Yeah, right.
Like a 1, 2, come on.
Yeah.
No, I need you 1, 2, 3, especially if it's a heated match.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So
I always call myself naive on this stuff, and maybe just the eternal dreamer, because with what your generation can do athletically, move-wise, is so far beyond what we could do, right? I could never do a backflip. I could do a backflip off a swimming pool while diving board, let alone in a ring where I might land on my head. And that's a huge plus if they could just figure out how to hone it down and not just vomit it up. But
I think a lot of wrestling now is they're just trying to get those pops and doing those high spots, and they're not thinking about how to actually make it make sense, right?
Yes.
And even when I worked with WWE, and this even goes with the independent companies everywhere. One time you'll work for them and they'll say, oh, yeah, this has to be done this way because, we can't make these people look stupid. And then the following week, it's completely the opposite. And I'm like, what about making, and they're like, this is what people want. This is what they want. Right. So, and this is my biggest thing with pro wrestling, especially to those trying to train and what should I do is what's right and wrong. It's pro wrestling. There is no right or wrong, right? Now, I think the better you are, the more it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So you can do cool spots and whatever, but the more it makes sense, the more believable it is, the better, even at the highest level. That's why guys like Will Ospreay are so good, because he does a lot of spots and crazy stuff, but he hits his moves with conviction. There's a lot of athleticism. He's very physical, know? And I think that's I think a lot of guys that are trying to aspire to be somebody like Will Ospreay, they try to do those spots and those running things. But if you're jogging through these spots and everything else, and that's why even when I first started wrestling, and I was trying to do these kind of things, but then I saw everybody doing it way better than me, hitting the ropes harder, doing everything better. I'm like, I'm just going to stick to what I can do better than everybody here. And that was right.
Well, and that really is what the differentials between the characters. I would always give this example of doing seminars when I had my own school. Take Bruno Sammartino, Dominic, Danucci, my trainer, Zabisco, all that generation. If you'd have put them in head-to-toe black bodysuits and couldn't see an inch of skin, hair, whatever, you would instantly know which one was Bruno, just by the way he carried himself in the build. My generation, I think you'd know me from Taz, me from Raven, Tommy from Taz or Sabu.
Yeah.
I wonder today when I look and I see these kids are all about the same size and everything, would you know the difference? Someone with a trained eye like yours might say, okay, I know that move.
I'll say this. You know what I've noticed, especially like say with a company, like say they all do this, but like say a company like AEW. Mm-hmm. AEW is great, but a lot of the guys same kind of style, same size. Yeah. And then you can take somebody like Shelton Benjamin, who was in WWE but wasn't really being utilized like he should be. And now
and good guy,
great guy. I love Shelton. Yeah. And now he's in AEW. And now, him compared to their roster and the way he works, because he's not going to do a bunch of dives.
Right.
He's a bigger, stronger, has a great amateur background. He's also 250. He's a stallion, right? So when he comes, he hits a big lariat, the crowd reacts. You know, he's
sure.
And because of the size difference and everything else, and how he's perceived and the way he's allowed to work, and because his style is so much different than everybody else, because a lot of people there are trying to get those pops and do the dives and the Canadian destroyers and everything, but there's a place and time.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's funny you say it because I think this is a big criticism. I heard 30 people say this to me this weekend at WrestleCade, that I never once had to walk in the dressing room and say, hey guys, the belly bell is my fitness, please don't use it as a spot. Or Jake's on the show, the same thing. It was just a camaraderie and a respect amongst the boys. Hey, I'm here, this is Jake the Snake Roberts, that's his move, so don't use it as a spot. Even though he's going to do it better than you do it, don't do it. And whenever, how that played out is after a couple of years, once I was in the business, and you start, when it was happening, I didn't even notice it. It was just, okay, well, I work with Pez, now I'm going to work with Black Bart. I didn't realize each one of those was a little bit higher on the card. Looking back now, I can see it, but at the time I didn't. Where each of those guys would take you and show you things, and if I went a little too far out or got outside of what their plan for that storyline was, they'd clamp on you, not to hurt you, they'd clamp on you, okay, we're going to settle it down. I think the generations today have really missed out on not being in the dressing rooms with 20-year veterans that would be Hall of Famers down the road, in the planes, in the dressing rooms, in the clubs that we're going out to. Those were, if I were going for my master's or my doctorate degree, and you could sit down with Albert Einstein or,
you can sit with some of the best people that are killing it at the top of their business at that time.
Yeah.
You think they would.
Right.
Yeah.
And why not though? Is it just because they've never been in the ring with guys older than them like that? Because again, as the eternal
I think you probably even know this. Like when you're younger, you think you know everything.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's just it. You know, I'll say one of my strengths was wrestling and even fighting. And like even when I just said, there's no wrong answers in wrestling, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, even in mixed martial arts, I would train with one striking instructor, and he'd teach me these techniques, and then I'd train with another one. And half the stuff I'm learning from this guy, the last one was like, oh, don't do this, it doesn't work. But it was working, and especially when you did it like this.
Right.
And I'm like, so now it's just, there's like Muay Thai, boxing, kickboxing, like there's different styles of techniques, and then there's different, Dutch kickboxing, and then Muay Thai from Thailand. And you got karate, and there's talking about doing. So it's like, you got all these different styles, you just gotta, there's no wrong answer, right? And I feel like in wrestling, it's very much the same thing.
Yeah.
But you got to do it with conviction. You got to do it with believability and everything like that.
Interesting take, because it's, as I started to say the numbers earlier, I'm going to go back to this so I can complete the thought first. I'll get your reaction to it. We knew when we were on the road in the 90s, we knew that wrestling was just, you kept expecting the bubble to burst at some point, because it had gone from these size buildings to these size buildings to these size buildings still selling them out. And at a point we reached thinking it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, like, as silly as that sounds. But the numbers, when you look back at the numbers and compare those to today, where the cumulative viewership of wrestling just in America, forget Canada, Mexico, the rest of the world, just in America, you had the Monday Night Raws and Nitros, and you have the replays on Thursdays, and then the weekend shows, and ECW was over here drawing its 1.4 million, 1.5 million. So at the time, the average viewership in America alone in those few years was 48 to 52 million viewers, which is astounding when you look at now. The industry is drawing somewhere around 4 or 5 million per week. If I'm selling hamburgers, I want to sell to 50 million people, not 5 million people. And I really don't know the answer to it. Is it just?
I'll say this: there's too many outlets to really measure it, and it's a hard number to accurately measure now.
Yeah.
So I will say this: even just in America, just from social media, from Twitter, Instagram alone, not even people looking it up trying to watch it, more people probably see pro wrestling one way or another multiple times a day on their feeds. You know,
Sure.
and that's one thing that has never, that was never a thing, right?
Right.
And I think in that, there's actually probably just as many eyes on it. You know, I think before it used to be destination TV. It was either a recording or live,
Right.
and you had to tune in, and it was very easily documented and being able to
Right,
tell.
right.
Also, because the lack of internet or streaming service or anything, you had to go to live shows. You
Yeah.
had to be there. You don't know what happened, right?
Right, right.
Well, now, I mean, I'm wrestling Ali. There's a bunch of other top guys on the show,
Yeah.
and it's going to be probably streamed on some kind of platform,
Mhm.
and then be free on YouTube. There's going to be a bunch of clips on Twitter and Instagram
Right,
and
sure.
TikTok.
Yeah.
And how do you measure? Do you add all those numbers?
Yeah.
Right. I guess you could, and even then, it still might not equal the same. But
Right.
I still think through crossing, it's probably good. But I still don't think the demand's the same. But I do think we live in a weird time where content is king,
Yeah.
and it's like just like WWE getting deals and their library is just days, weeks, months of content. Like
Yeah.
you could watch WWE or you could watch ECW for
Yeah.
probably a couple
Yeah.
weeks or a month or so. Like
Right.
you watch all the TVs and the tapings and the
Sure.
promos and everything. It's months of
Yeah.
content. You can't put there's no price on that, right?
Right.
Now, granted, people that actually want to watch it, you can put a price on that, maybe.
Sure.
But content's content,
Right.
and you also got to realize with culture and how things change. Right now, whatever, tomorrow a video of ECW could go viral,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden ECW is just in super demand again.
Yeah, yeah.
You just you
Yeah.
never know, you know.
Yeah, can't quite gauge off just the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think
Then
what's-
think about it like this. Before the network came out, there was kind of a lull, right? And then that network came out, and the indies blew up. I remember Cody left WWE, and he was doing Ring of Honor in the indies.
Right.
I was wrestling. There was a bunch of us wrestling. Keith Lee, a bunch of us,
Yeah.
and I was making and this is me. Never wrestled on TV before, and I'm making. Me and these other guys are probably making each like way over 6 figures a year.
Yeah, yeah.
What you gotta think is crazy for a guy that's never wrestled at WWE, and I'm not doing meet and greets because nobody knows me.
Right.
Like nobody's chanting bro or anything until
Yeah.
after the match, after I've yelled bro a couple
Right.
times,
Yeah.
and they like how I'm working, you
Yeah,
know? So it was, but it was a boom. I remember talking to Cody. You guys had that boom in like the midnight.
Right.
That was the indie boom for us, and it was like, and Cody was like flying first class, wrestling indies,
Yeah.
making crazy money, doing meet and greets everywhere.
Sure.
And he was like, dude, we're in a boom right now.
Yeah.
It's like, and he was, look at him now. He was
Right.
in the right place. Cody's very smart. He plays the game. You know,
Yeah.
he's, of course, has a family lineage,
Yeah.
but just smart, you
Yeah.
know? And I was part of it. I felt like same thing when I fought. I chose fighting over or pro wrestling because at that time the UFC was the fastest growing sport
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
world.
Exploded.
The Ultimate Fighter just did their first show. By the time I got into the UFC a year or two later, it was season 7. And I got on the Ultimate Fighter season 7. You know, I got into it. really early if you think about it, because by the time they quit that show and went into a different show, they're on like 27 or 30.
Yeah.
So but it's trends and honestly, right place, right time. Even yesterday, I was at the WrestleCade, right? And I didn't come here to wrestle till today.
Right.
I just had signings, and Zachary Wentz and Dreamer and a couple of the other guys told me somebody got injured and they need a replacement. And they debuted for TNA last night. Didn't have that plan, but right place, right time. And that's all it was. I was just standing there, and you fit the story. You're good. You got gear. I'm like, of course I got gear. I don't show up to any of these things without at least 2 pairs of gear.
It's when you were a kid watching wrestling, and with the shoot background and the amateur wrestling background, how old were you when you became aware that pro wrestling, may not be a pure sport?
I knew it very early on, but at the same time, this is my thing. I knew what it was, but I appreciated those who went so hard that is real.
Yes.
Right? Like, so when I would watch like Kurt Angle or even ECW, I was a big fan of the Jerry Lynn or Rob Van Dam.
Who wasn't?
Yeah, right? And granted, like, doing rules and so on.
Don't ever tell Jerry I said that.
Yeah. But, and some of it's like, you're not going to do these slips and tricks in them. But the fact that somebody's able to do it and do it at that level of execution and intensity. That's real. Like, that's a real, like, and watching, like, say, like, somebody, like, I know, he did what he did. I'm not a huge fan of that, but Chris Benoit. But, dude, you can't argue his in-ring ability to just beat the crap out of somebody, get a crowd so invested into a match, and the selling and like, you can see the pain in the heart. Like, it's just, it's real. That's real. Like, they're so good. That's real. Just like acting. Nobody goes up to an actor and goes, "That's fake." It's fake. And it's like, because essentially, like, and trust me, there's bad movies out there where like, oh, you're not really crying. Like, that's fake.
Sure.
But, and I feel like with wrestling, it's like, but when you do it that well, I think that's like, say, something like a Shawn.
Right.
Like, they get the kudos they do because they went that extra mile, And like, and for example, like that Iron Man match with Shawn and Brett. That was probably one of my favorite matches. But if you watch it, they're just going hard, and it's pro wrestling. You're not gonna see this in a street fight, but they're going so hard and hitting the moves with such good, hitting the ropes for their, dude, that's real.
Yes,
like, that's real.
Yeah, it's when you started training at the Monster Factory and started making this cognizant decision to go from amateur into this. Well, I know the kayfabe was no longer followed, but were the trainers in the schools at that time insinuating it, explaining it, of our business being a work, and why it would be protected? It should be protected by the kayfabe and not just going, hey, here's Matt and I, we're going to be wrestling and beat the hell out of each other 2 days from now. And here we are having tuxedos and having a good night.
They did. I trained with, so Danny Cage runs the Monster Factory, and then Blue Meanie was also there. Also, Damian Priest and QT Marshall were there as well. Nice. And they were probably the 2 reasons why I went to the Monster Factory, other than the Monster Factory was open multiple days a week. Like, a lot of wrestling schools aren't open that often.
Right.
Monster Factory, I think it's open 4 or 5 days a week. And for me, I was like, I wanted to be in there. And then QT and Punishment Martinez at the time, but Damian Priest now, they were very, very good at professional wrestling. They loved professional wrestling just like I did.
Right.
And they're also bigger guys, right? Like, like if I can pick them up and throw them around and do these spots with them, I can do it with the 155.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So for me, and then at that time, even then, like most guys that were, like, you go to a wrestling training school, like, I remember Joe Briscoe came in once, and he goes, if you can look in the mirror and see yourself in WWE TV, like, good, and be honest with yourself. And I, like, literally looked around the room, and I saw some people be like, and I was like, no. No, what the fuck are you talking about, man?
Right.
And I was like, but yeah, it just, it is what it is.
A story a little bit, again, from the old times, make the comparison. Dominic DeNucci, our trainer, had this school that produced quite a few talents out of there, several world champions, and there was a time when we had the three companies. We had a show for Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, the referee, who was dying of stomach cancer at the time. It was the only time ECW, WWE, and WCW were on the same card. We were forbidden from filming it. We should have done it anyway, but we didn't. And what we saw that day, at least what I saw, was I joked with his wife Pam. I said, we should run with these every day of the week because he'll never be gone. He was as sick as he was. Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis is the referee. He was booking this show and talking with the guys and laying out the finishes. He'd probably still be alive. He was so vibrant with it, and a month or two later he was gone. The intensity to tell the story, because as you know, there are so many different emotions that go into shoot fighting or into boxing or amateur wrestling or any athletic pursuit that you go after. How do they fit that in? Because when I watch the product, when I like say AEW, and I know Arn and Tully and Jake and Jerry and Billy and Jamie, all these guys, I know how they teach, I learn from most of them. And yet I see no imprint or stamp of Arn Anderson has a very distinctive style. Tully did. Jake Roberts did. All of them did. And you could usually pick out and go, I bet Ole taught him that. Or not Ole, Arn. Or whatever. I don't see that today. When I asked Arn about it, he said, franchise in 3 years, not a single kid asked me a single question. And I was flummoxed by that. How in God's name? I'm guessing you see, like you mentioned Brock or the Gracies way back when. John Thomas, is it John Thomas' name? All those guys. I would imagine that if I were just getting into shoot fighting and I was much younger, I would probably have a few questions for those guys because they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right? And yet you have somebody like Arn not being asked that question. I'm trying to wrap my brain around this because you always hear us old timers talking about things that are lacking in the business today that need to be put back in. You mentioned a big one earlier, selling. A lot of wrestlers today don't want to sell because and there were some
they look weak.
Yeah, yes, and it's not weakness, right? How many times in a shoot fighting have you been knocked on your ass and then gone up?
Well, I look at it like this: how many times do you see a guy hit 20 strikes and then nothing happens, or they just get cut off, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Right. If I kick you once,
sure,
that should be enough to back you up, and then you can cut me back up. But why would I hit you? If I'm a UFC fighter and I hit you with a 10-piece combo, and then you just hit me with a kitchen sink when I hit the ropes after that,
right.
I don't understand. Not saying I won't do it,
right.
But usually I'll hit 1 or 2 strikes, boom, 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 then hit the rope maybe or do something. Or I personally prefer if they duck something and push me, and then I rebound and then they come off and hit me. If they want a running motion.
Right. I'm trying to figure out, and I get answers all over the place, and none of them really suffice as to what the question I'm trying to get answered. Yeah. And that question is like you said, with the selling and these missing pieces of what goes into
why aren't people asking veterans more so what they're missing and putting back in the pieces of believability and making it not a shoe, but making people question. And I'll tell you this, one of my things is, and I think it's the reason why I get as much traction or play articles or whatever, is I blur lines. Yeah. And that's money. Yeah. In our business, in a business where it's fake or whatever, it's not real, I blur lines. People think Goldberg hates me. People think Brock wants to kill me. People think Seth Rollins hates me. People think Roman hates me. Don't get me wrong. Maybe they've hated me a little bit at times.
Right.
But you blur the lines.
Sure.
And everybody that's worked with me knows I'm professional. I'm nice as can be, etc. But the value comes from making you people talk. And I don't care if you say you're amazing or if you say you hate me. At the end of the day, you're still talking about me, and you're talking about the people I'm working with, and that's where the value comes, and that's the money. So be it hate, be it praise, that's perfect. You know what sucks, but nobody says anything.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that sucks.
Yeah, that's rough.
You know,
Yeah.
I'd rather people talk trash about me or love me. If the worst thing you could do is not make a peep.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that, you know, if people really hate you and really want it, that's what they do.
Yeah. What's an emotion? Right? An emotion, good, bad, in between. If you have strong emotions or something, it's sure as hell going to suck you in.
Yeah. So I think people aren't asking. I also think kids, like we talked about, they don't want to ask. They think they know everything, especially with how society is going. I don't mean to, you know, and I also think they think they know better. And then wrestling, say we take someone like, it's very spotty. Right? Like me, I'd rather go out there, wrestle, take you down to the ground, establish that I'm this badass where I got you here, and then maybe you out pro wrestling. Maybe a headlock, shoot off, and you outmaneuver me, drop kick me, or whatever. And we kind of keep it real, and I can sell, you can sell. We keep it gritty, and then we can eventually work to use that grittiness to then show something pretty, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, a lot of the times now it's like, you know, it's too pretty.
Yeah,
and that's one thing I try to stay away from, you know. And because it gets ugly, people, that's when the line blurs.
Yes,
right?
of course.
When it's not ugly, wow, they're really good at what they do, but that's where it ends, you know. And I think a lot of people don't understand. You want to be really good at what you do, but then you also want people to be like, yo, that one shot. Like sometimes I'll kick out of a falsie and the guy's sitting there and I'll fucking slap him in the face quick. Not hard, but enough where he's going to shove me back down. And then the fans watching is like, was he supposed to kick out? Like, did he stiff him on that move? Like, I'm blurring the line. And that's, for me, that's where I think the value is. I think that's like the art that's lost. Being the, how do you carry yourself in the ring? Why would you walk all the way to the other corner and stuff like that? And it's that believability. You know, I think people are more so trying to get that. And it feels good to get some claps, right? But there's a right way. Like, I'd rather do my set, whatever kick out, and then just look at the audience. And trust me, they're not going to be quiet after 3 to 5 seconds. Even though I'm not doing anything, they're going to be like, yeah, bro. They're going to start chanting something. Boom, whatever it is. They're going to start doing something because they want something else to happen. But I'm going to make them wait and cheer for it. I don't have to clap you or G you up for it because I feel like that's a cheap thing. I do. Like if I was ever in a fight, I would never go. Right. Now I might crack you in the face a couple times, and when you wobble back, go like this and get the crowd roaring, and then go for the finish. But I'm not gonna do these certain things. Now, if I'm on the apron and I'm trying to get the crowd, I might G them up. So now, hey, hot tag, you know. But different. And even then, like, I like G'ing up a hot tag. Like, and a lot of people, they do some cool flippy trick and then tag me. I'm like, oh, there's no real build up to that hot tag now, is there? You're just evading a move and tagging. So there's no hot tag. You know?
It really built to what we need to build to, right?
Exactly. Even if you put heat on, for 5 minutes and then he just does a dip, dive, and flip and touches my hand, nobody cares. But if, say, whatever, hold 1 foot, and then, you know, you know what I mean, just by that.
Blurring that line between.
And I think that's the lost art in between, say, your generation and now the generation coming in. And I think it's a problem. Some people, like I said, Will Ospreay does it very well. But the promos are pretty believable. His wrestling's very believable. It's a little spotty, but like so good, you know. And he's gritty enough, you know. But there's a lot of guys out there where it's just pretty.
It's one of the things that really stands out to me in a negative way. From the kids in the business, I say kids because I'm that much older. It's when you see them going out and they'll say, I've heard young guys in the business and women say, well, that was right in 1995, but the business changed, so it's no longer right. And
the business is going to change in 3 months. It changes. Like, just even seeing the independent scene now from where it was when I was on the indies, it's night and day different, dude. Night and day. And then even from when I started on the indies again in January to now, almost a year, night and day difference.
Yes,
dude.
sure.
Even the reactions and everything. I'm like, now it's like it's coming around. I feel like
good
in a different way. You know,
because you said the business changed. Pro football is different than it was 20 years ago. Basketball is different. Every major sport is and will be, but when what we call the formula in the business, right? The formula being you got a heel that knows how to get heat, a baby face that knows how to sell and get shine. The idea that selling makes you look weak. That's when I know this will sound silly, but you can go back and watch the tapes. I watched on a nightly basis being tag team partners with Ricky Steamboat. And then, of course, I grew up watching Ricky and Robert from the dressing room and from the curtains. They were elegant in the way they performed. Nothing was, they have a baseball bat, and you're going to drop like you've been shot in the head. But literally 3 seconds from now, and I don't mean you, I'm using the euphemism. Suddenly, 3 seconds later, they jumped up and doing backflips and flying over the
let me
ropes.
work your leg.
Yes.
But my comeback consists of
Right.
I run into the corner, do a backflip. Don't worry, I'll limp a little bit, but I'll kick you.
Yes. Yeah.
And then run to you, hit you with two forearms, and
Sabu was to me a transformative figure in wrestling. Prior, it was boots and tights and moves and grappling. And there were some high flyers and stuff in there, but Sabu was the first one. One of the key ingredients that I thought really separated him from the pack before and since is that he sold his own moves. So if he put you through the table, he'd also roll over and be selling his moves because that
it hurt him too. He just wanted to mess you up too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's great stuff. We're getting ready.
No, it's great when you had to do dives and then like fire up afterwards. I'm like, dude, he barely caught me.
Man, I would thank you for being here. I definitely would love to have you back.
I think we got plenty more to talk about.
A lot of fun.
Yeah,
we can get into a lot
You know,
of
the
stuff.
first time I ever saw you, I think it was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for Keystone Pro Wrestling.
Yes, and Jeff Jarrett was
KPW.
there, right?
Yeah, he was at one of them. I think you had a crazy match where somebody jumped off.
Yeah, where was that?
It was a wild one. You guys were the main event.
All the time. Yes, I do remember that. Because the reason it stood out in my head was because at that time there was another company in Lancaster called Lancaster Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, the LCW.
They would pack that room up. Moose had been there several times, and that's why I remember Jeff Jarrett being there, and I remember the match you're talking about vaguely, but I also remember it being close to where Lancaster Championship Wrestling ran. So, like I said, I'd love to have you back. Because we're just scratching the surface. There's so many other questions I have, and I would need to coalesce them in my head for the shoot fight background stuff and the other amateur background, because that's a rarity in our business today, right? It's sort of like the reverse trend. One final question in that vein before we go to that, we'll certainly forget it by then. When I've heard from multiple people that have gone through the what do they call the training center, the
PC?
Yes, Performance Center. And I've heard from multiple different people that the people that were there for tryouts were underwear models, people endeavoring to use wrestling as a stepping stone to someplace else, which I think is a big difference and a big change. None of us had the idea, look, I'll do this for a year or two, then I'm going to head to Hollywood because I'll be well known. I wanted to be a pro wrestler and enjoyed it. What's your take on that? Is that a legitimate thing? Is it something that's just an aberration? Or
For me, pro wrestling.
Yeah,
I wanted to do it. I went through a different channel. I went through college wrestling, jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts, and then I found myself in a position where I can obtain this goal that I've wanted since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I think that's me. This is official. I mean, if I get some kind of movie, that'd be cool. But if it happens, I'll take it.
Sure.
Right? I'm not going to be stupid. But at the end of the day, I think for me, like, I like fighting. I like wrestling. When I started wrestling, the one thing I loved about it is I could do it as much as I wanted.
Yeah.
While fighting, I could fight maybe 3 or 4 times a year max, and then opponents pull out, etc. Pro wrestling, if somebody pulls out, somebody will fill in, just like I did yesterday.
Of course, yeah.
So for me, it was just the love of that and the experience and the cage fighting and all that helps so much. Much. But at the end of the day, it was just my journey, kind of like Brock went kind of college wrestling, pro wrestling, UFC, right?
Yeah.
But he would not have gotten a title shot in the UFC after like 3 fights if it wasn't for his WWE career.
Sure.
Because I wouldn't have got in the position I got into when I first hit the indie scene if it wasn't for my UFC pedigree.
Do you believe that with Endeavor buying UFC parent company and Endeavor buying WWF, I'll always say WWF or WWE, was that I'm trying to figure out what their mindset was. Why did they purchase? And is it because
you do great cross-platform,
right?
And I will say this: a lot of fighters like myself love pro wrestling, right? But we do our thing, you guys do your thing,
Sure.
And just like a lot of pro wrestlers love MMA.
Of course.
Honestly, it's a match made for the boys and girls that do it.
Right.
Like if I told you if you're wrestling WWE, ECW, say, hey, here's tickets to the UFC tonight.
Yeah. Of course.
Dude, let's go see some fights. Vice versa. You're UFC, but hey, WWE's in your town. Go show some face.
Right.
Okay, I get to enjoy a show and be a fan. Right. So I think it's great for the people in that sense, and I think business-wise, it's great too. If you like UFC and you like WWE, there's basically one platform for you now, one endeavor, one endeavor.
Was it? And if this is the reason, I hope it's the reason. But it's a brilliant reason. At 40, you can't do what you could do at 30.
Correct.
And certainly shoot fighting.
Yeah, and it's a transition.
Yes.
Especially for some of the more charismatic mixed martial artists. Because I'll say this, I know a lot of fighters. A lot of them are very dull. Yeah. They're just like, I eat, I train, I beat people up, I don't like you.
Right, yeah.
Right? There's a reason why some
Brad
people
Armstrong shoot fighter, right?
Yeah. Well, like me, even when I was in the world of MMA, I lit up a room when I walked in because most guys are cutting weight, like, I'll kill you, like, don't look at me. Yeah. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm starving. I'm trying to lighten them, but I'm not happy either. Sure. But hey, and then even the guy would be fighting, like, hey man, let's do business, No, great, I'm gonna try to kill you. You try to kill me. Try to make it as safe as possible so we get a bonus or something, right?
Was that the idea for Endeavor? Was when a Matt Riddle, a John Thomas, fill in the blank, when they reach that point where they can't really do this incredibly physical style, that now they can go to pro wrestling a little bit more tame as far as nobody's trying to take your head off in wrestling.
Exactly.
Right? So that's a brilliant thing because a lot of those guys, as you know, have really over the top personalities. Yeah. And,
that's the thing. Some of them are dull, but some of them are over the top. And I was always taught this. Blue Meanie taught me this, Brian, and he goes, just know this, and he goes, you're in a good spot. He goes, you're high up, right? In the sense of how you come at it's like the last thing you want to be is you don't want people to tell you to turn it up, right? You know how to say be yourself but turn it up times 10, right? The last thing you want is somebody to tell you to turn it up. You can always turn it down, but you can't if you're already up and they're turn it up and you're
where do you go from there?
But you can always turn it down. That's something he taught me, and even especially in wrestling, it's over the top. You got to be even more of a character.
Of course.
Because even when I fought MMA, I really wasn't over the top. I was just very respectful. Hey, I work hard. I'm raising my family. It's and then eventually, I was like, fuck this. Time to be a character. And then you kind of find yourself.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, we can go on all night. I'm sure we're definitely have you back because I've got so many other things to ask you. But for now, WrestleCade has a bunch of work we've already done being here. I want to thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Good talking to you. And for you guys at home, Appalachian Expose, appreciate you always tuning in. But when you start to see guys like Matt Riddle and all of my friends, other friends that have been on here, you're going to hear great stuff. Appreciate you being here. See you next time on Appalachian Expose.